I'll concede your point just for brevity, but
What? Brevity? We don't do that around here. It's probably
No.
Citrus, or what is a Capital One Bowl? It used to be Citrus Bowl, right?
oh my
Capital
god,
One.
dude, where have you been?
I just like the real name.
It hasn't been the Citrus Bowl since like what, 2002?
What was your highlight side dish from Thanksgiving?
Oh gosh, Scotch.
This is the Buck Around, the podcast devoted to all things Wisconsin Badger football from a fan perspective. Featuring your hosts, Richard Branch and Maxwell Brusky.
And hello, everyone, and welcome back to the Buck Around. Welcome back to episode 314 of the Buck Around. I am Richard Branch, one half of the Buck Around, and I am joined by my surprising colleague, Maxwell Brusky. Max, how are you, sir? You're nodding approvingly.
Yeah, I like that. I'm surprised that I'm recording from the remote location instead of the
Exactly.
usual studio, and it sounds okay.
We're
least I
breaking.
think it-
Yes, it does. I think so. All
Yeah.
things considered.
Yeah,
We are
Yeah.
breaking a promise here. We said we were taking a week off, and we're not. We decided to push up. Enough is going on that we could, have a little discussion, and maybe next week we'll take that time off, so to speak, because I don't know. What am I trying to say? The time isn't out.
it's a holiday week. It's a holiday week.
Yeah.
Next week. So,
Well, and
yeah.
I don't think much is going to happen in the next week. So, yeah, here we are. We got some things to actually wrap up spring on. Where should we start?
Finally for real, Rep.
Yes, for real this time. This time I mean it, as they say. Should we just, I guess, let's start with Badger news, which interestingly enough, this really did wrap up about 45 minutes ago. But the long, strained journey to find a body in the defensive line room, has come to an end as the Badgers have thrown in the towel. Let's see. CJ West is enjoying Bloomington. JVR Suggs is down at LSU. Curtis Perry is in Virginia Tech. Then they kind of made like some last gasps to that guy from Stephen F. Austin, the grad transfer. What was his name? Brandon Lane. He's at Louisville. And Gavin Meyer is still uncommitted. However, I don't know if you saw, because you were in the midst of doing things. And about 45 minutes ago, Hawken Anderson got a scholarship. So the Badgers are now at 85. So,
Hawken Anderson, huh?
yeah. Gavin Meyer, we barely
Interesting.
knew thee.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
I guess that is kind of throwing in the towel, isn't it?
That's 100%. You're at 85. I mean,
Yeah,
unless there's an
yeah.
unknown departure, you're not going to be able to add one. And there's an unknown departure in the next. I mean, unless a guy got hurt and we don't know it, right?
Yeah.
And
Right.
that kind of thing. There's a medical that just hasn't been announced. They're done. So we'll see. I mean, we'll know. You know what? If Gavin Meyer in the next few days ends up saying he's going to Wisconsin, there's your answer. Then you know that there's something up. But as of right now, it's over. How are we feeling? We're both sitting there quietly as we say that.
I know. It's well, congratulations to Hawken.
Yes, but this is not a
Because
knock on him.
that's always an awesome thing, and I didn't see any tweets from the Badger football account that I get the notifications for, but I would imagine there will be one with the celebration.
Oh, there already
that you
is.
get.
That's how it came out.
I wonder why I didn't get a notification of it, but here nor there. But yeah, I think one of the consensus things I think we have just from people that have talked to us by emails or voicemails is defensive line depth. I think that's a consensus. If people are all over the map in terms of what they think is going to happen next year,
Right.
that's an area of consensus. Is defensive line is kind of a big worry.
Yeah, and that actually, let's do this. I think it ties into our friend Ryan from Seattle, who sent us, I think like a week and a half ago. I think I said it last week, a 9-minute voicemail about everything you could involving the Badgers. Might have even talked about the beer they were selling. Actually, no, because he's in Seattle. So
Yeah, I know. The beer.
Yeah, he hasn't had it. But he did have something about the defensive line. And you actually have that voicemail. I snipped a little piece out of it. Why don't we roll that and we'll give it a listen.
I'm stuck in traffic on the way home from work. This is Ryan from Seattle, by the way. D-line, terrifying. I'm really excited about the linebacker room. I don't know how they're going to look behind a defensive line that seems to be made of paper mache. The other thing I keep thinking too is I feel like the loss of Rodas Johnson and Gio Paez went super under the radar. Like, those guys decided to transfer out, and everyone was like, oh, yeah, like, you know, they were whatever. Rodas wasn't a great fit. The writing was on the wall, yada, yada, yada. But, I don't know. Those were also guys with a lot of game time experience, and, like, looking back at it, like, we sure as hell could use them now. I was surprised by how willing fans seem to be to kind of, like, write them off and be cool with them leaving. Like, I think they are low-key the two most important losses we've had this off-season. I don't know. I think that while neither of them were ever going to be superstars, I feel like we would feel a lot better about the D-line here if we're still on the roster.
All right. What do you think of that? Like, do you think, in retrospect, we were too flippant, I guess, or whatever you want to call it, about the departure of Rodas and Gio? Like, where are you now?
I don't
retrospect?
know. It's a big deal in terms of bodies, I guess, right?
I mean, it's bodies, yes.
Yeah. When, I guess if we're looking for bodies, which I guess we are, but we went over, the 6 that are basically going to play, or we think are going to play.
Right.
Outside of the game experience, and again, with Rodas not so much, but definitely with Gio Paez, it took those guys a lot of years in the program to see the field.
That's the tricky part. See, like, I look at them as a little bit of two different players.
Sure. Yeah.
Like, I view them in different contexts, maybe. Like, I don't disagree. Like, the two of you are both saying, like, you and Ryan are both saying, like, bodies, right? They are bodies.
Yeah,
and they're
firmly am, yeah.
Yeah, and they are bodies that I think would play snaps. But the Rodas thing, I still think Rodas was a guy who was kind of like, I'm done. I think Rodas has played a lot of football at Wisconsin and was kind of always, like, he wasn't going to get any better than what he was. Like, we knew what he was. As observers of the team, and as the defense was changing, he just didn't seem like a guy who was adapting particularly well. And this goes back to vibes. I hate vibes, but I know nothing, but I just get the vibe that was a guy who maybe was ready for a change of scenery. Like, he was done. And I don't know that having him still around would give them a ton. The other one, we've talked about Gio. I think Gio you could look at more as, like, I think that would be someone they could use, because I don't get the sense that he was a guy who maybe soured on things. But the reality was, I think what LSU was willing to give, I mean, we've seen it with two guys. I mean, they've lost to LSU twice with Gio and this JVR Suggs, the Suggs guy. I mean,
yeah.
I have a feeling that there was a willingness on LSU's part to invest in a way that Wisconsin wouldn't, especially with a Gio, right? So I think Gio, yes, it would be nicer to have around. Rodas on a, much, much, much less. I think Rodas would play snaps, but I don't know what he'd give you that would outweigh what you're going to get out of the rest of them. Like, he's not better than James Thompson, right? I mean, James Thompson was a better player last year.
Definitely.
He's probably, if you're assuming some progression from Kurt Neal year over year, some improvement, you'd like to think that they're about toe-to-toe, right? And then Ben Barton is what, a half step behind Rodas?
Yeah, probably.
Ish. A quarter. I mean, like, not by much, but something. Yeah. Like, it's edge Rodas.
Yeah.
So he's like he's the 2.5 to the 3, right? Somewhere in there. He'd probably be in the top 3 rotation type of thing. But he would just give you depth, I think, is the reality. I don't think that he'd be better than any of the top 3. And I don't other than giving you a sense of, yes, it would be nice to have another body, I'm okay. I'm still okay with it, I guess is what I'm getting at. Is even
Yeah.
I don't know if it would make the team markedly better, but
Yeah.
not having him, at least you're gonna get some guys some snaps. We're gonna get get a little sniff of some young guys. So I guess in the end, I'm not totally torn up about it. That's a very long way of saying that. Is that reasonable?
It's apart from the lengths, yes, that's reasonable.
Yeah, I really danced around that one.
Yeah. Well, no, I'm totally with you. I don't know what, other than bodies, I don't know what you'll lose. And I think it's interesting though with the LSU thing, right?
Yeah.
That I don't know, because that's the Suggs is. I think he was, what was he? He's in the top 5 defensive linemen that were left in the portal. I don't want to say that we're in the portal, but they
Right.
were left in the portal. And I mean, you're talking about last time, just with the portal. One of the things you can kind of look at is we're talking after spring portal. So I mean, if you get a guy like that, I think it would have been a good thing. But it's interesting about who's spending what, because I think you're right. I mean, Dios seemed like he could fit in still or whatever. Maybe he needed to change the scenery too, and LSU made it worth his while. But would you say that the position is something where maybe they ought to, quote, spend a little more money,
Well,
or or do you guys just want to go to LSU over Wisconsin? I don't know.
it will. We have some stuff actually I wanted to talk about with the collective
Yeah,
stuff
yeah.
because there were some reports. I mean, we could
Yeah.
sort of touch on it now, but I don't know. Like I get the sense. I mean, if you look at who they were after, they were never after the top line guys. Like who are they? They're after an Alabama transfer who hadn't really seen the field. Sounds
Right.
like he would be rotational. I
Right.
think the guy they got right now, why am I always forgetting his name? The Albany transfer. He is a depth guy. I mean, I don't know that he was. It sounds like he's not quite showing out maybe the way Elijah Hills. I couldn't think of his name.
Yeah,
The way you
Hills.
and I wanted him to. But maybe that's not what they wanted. Maybe they were just looking at depth guys. The thing we don't know, which you've got me thinking, is maybe they're looking for bridge. These are bridge bodies, right? They're not looking for top line come in and be the starter guys. It's give us a little depth for these young guys to start rolling in. Now, that may or may not be the right play, but maybe that's the way they're looking at all these guys. Because who did they? I do think they do want numbers, just because as soon as Suggs was off the board, they offered the guy that went to Louisville. I mean, like within moments.
No, they were
but
trying.
That was so they definitely feel like they need depth, but I don't know that they felt they needed top line guys. Like I don't know that they feel like they wanted starters. I think that maybe they are looking at this thing as a multi-year build it out. You know, going back to that thing where the vibes, if you will.
Yeah.
That they're sort of being a little more careful at that position, because it definitely is a position that is in flux, and you need to build a culture because there's not a lot of guys left in it. I mean, it's right. I mean, it's a little hollowed out. So maybe you don't want to upset the apple cart too much. That would be another long rambling answer of mine that I don't know if it really means anything, but we're in such an amorphous, vibey thing around this defensive line, and there's almost like nothing left to say about it. But I'm going to keep talking about it.
I know, but I think I don't think it's belabored, because I think it leads to I think it goes back to the question of what are you willing to spend the money on? and I think you raised a bunch of really good points there, that if it's bridge guys, if it's just bodies, well, it's like, what are we going to do? Because once you start setting prices, right? I mean, I feel like there's actual price discovery going on in the transfer market, which is kind of odd considering how much of the rest of the world of commerce has lost so much price discovery. But I think you're really at the point now where it really is a lot of price discovery, and you don't want to. If your plan is to just have bridge guys and bodies, why would you want to spend? And if you have to evaluate, like, okay, can we get by without making that investment right now. Whereas I wonder if those other, I mean, Louisville has money, right? Becky Hepburn, you know, and then obviously LSU has money and they're willing to spend it. And I don't know if, and I guess my question before was that, like, do you spend it at a quote premium, or at least what I consider to be a premium position? I don't think I'm alone in that. But if you do, like, where is that line between top line starter and then bodies and then, so on down the line, I guess.
Right.
Because I just don't think it's wasted conversation, because I think it really tells you kind of a lot, or it doesn't. It suggests you can infer a pretty good deal that may or may not be right, but I think I feel pretty comfortable in saying that they're not willing to spend the money, because I feel like these guys, it was really a question of, where am I getting paid the most? Is Louisville going to have a better season than Wisconsin this year? I don't know.
Right.
I mean, in LSU, it's LSU, which is awesome, but I mean, are they going to have a better season than they did last year? Are they going to have a better season than Wisconsin this year? Who knows, right? So if it's just the money, which it seems to be at this point for these kind of guys, then maybe they feel okay enough not to spend the money.
Well, I think you bring up, because it's where the players and where the other teams at. Especially, I look at the grad transfer guys who are marginal to very late draft pick type players. They're probably making, especially as a defensive lineman, you're probably doing better in college than if you go pro. So this is almost like draft, like the beta of the draft for them, because they're going to get paid for a year.
Well, let me throw this out there for you. Okay. So what if you do throw a lot of money, so to speak, to land one of these depth guys? And then you look at the players up and down your roster, they're going to be like, dude, why are they getting that kind of money? I'm better than that guy.
Correct.
You know what I mean? So I think, would you agree that there's got to be some of that going on?
100%. I mean, that was sort of what that's the best way to put the thing I've been trying to articulate about Gio, where like LSU is willing to spend more than Wisconsin, not so much because of the dollar, but because of the dynamic. That you put it better than I've been trying to say that for weeks, but like it throws off your team if you do it. Yeah. Also, I think part of it is Brian Kelly's at LSU just had an insane offense and ended up in, the mishmash of 7-5, 8-4 bowls, right?
Right.
So at a place like LSU that's paying him what they're paying him, with the implied expectation of what they're doing, and then him coming out and saying, we don't pay players, we develop them, to get his collective to then pay players so he can not have to develop them, which I love that. That's such a Brian Kelly move.
Oh,
He's
it totally is.
Amazing coach that way. But to do all that, and like you're in a different place if you're LSU. You are trying to you need rotational depth guys if you don't have the high end, and you're in a more desperate spot than I think Wisconsin is, because Wisconsin isn't in that crossroads spot, so to speak.
No.
So yes.
No. I don't know that we have. I just want to, because I do have one more point to make on this. That
sure.
If we're talking about paying players, though, it's not ability level, usefulness to the team equals price. There's a lot that goes into what the quote price is. It's not.
Yeah.
It's not cut and dried. We need to fill this roster spot so we can spend X. It's not like what dynasty settings in video games or whatever. You know what I mean. You don't have it's a lot more than just numbers on a board and that sort of thing. Those are a lot of things to think about.
And please don't bring up college football 25. I'm begging you. You just did it. You just did it. I can't talk about that.
I came close.
I know. Electronic Arts does not need any free publicity. Everyone, please stop doing it.
And they're not going to get any. They're not going to get any from me. So I've never played any of that in my entire life, and I'm not starting now. So.
Oh, I played tons, but I'm not. I'm 47 years old. I have no time for that now. Like I'm realistic about this. The last time they put out a game, I had kids in diapers, and I bought it, and I think I played like 4 games, and I don't have time, so it's not happening now. Whole different story. Let's move on Yes, that's the word I was looking for. We did get a whole bunch of reactions. Last week the show was largely like wishy-washy and we don't know what to say. And after we recorded, I kind of like, I'll sort of post our depth chart and try to, fish some thoughts from people through the Patreon and on social media and stuff like that. And as you mentioned, the D-line thing is pretty universal. Like, you're sort of hunting around. I was surprised that there's a lot more, what would I call it? Lack of buy-in on the transfers on the defense, especially at linebacker. Like, there's less than I thought there would be. But I'm wondering how much. I'm curious. You know what I think a lot of it is? And I think maybe it feeds a little bit of our uncertainty, is we're all still trying to figure out what to make of portal players. Like, you're still trying to figure out, like you said, we don't know what the motivation is on, like, what are they looking for out of certain portal players versus other ones? Right. Like Jaheim Thomas looks like he's going to be a hit, right? We talked about this a couple weeks ago. It looks like they did pretty well in the portal, where they got a bunch of hits, and you and I are much more bullish than maybe some others, just because we're like, look, they're passing other people. Like, they're clearly playing above other players. So call that one a W. But like, okay, was that the goal with Jaheim Thomas? Was he to come in and be, LB1, so to speak? We think that, but do we know that? And then, like, say another guy, like, is Terrell Henry, like, what was his role when they brought him in? Like, what were they envisioning? Yeah. Was it what it is, which sounds like, one of these four guys who rotates, or were they trying to have a one there? I mean, they're going to turn it away, but what was the expectation? And I feel like maybe that's part of it for all of us, because we just don't know how to define some of these portal guys and who they are and what they're meant to be. Because it's different than like, oh, the Badgers got a 4-star recruit at XYZ position. Like, even though we know a guy can bust, a guy can hit, in our minds, we have an expectation or like a frame of reference for what that player is as a recruit coming in versus, hey, here's a guy who was the third wide receiver at Michigan State last year. And this is what, is the sort of your reasonable boundary of best, worst case, right? I just don't, I think maybe that's part of it.
I think so too. Yeah. Yeah. It's hard. You just don't know. There's no track record either.
Like, when you have these guys like the Boston College guy coming in with 20 catches last year, and you're like, what does that mean? Like, what does that mean? Like, what am I looking for out of? I have no idea what to expect out of that guy as a player at this point.
I don't either, but I feel like kind of a putz since I didn't know it, and I went to my usual sources while we were talking, and it was staring at me right in the face. This is inside baseball, but had I realized it, I would have noticed that I came across at least one depth chart that had him as one of the top wide receivers.
Yeah, I mean, he was the second leading wide receiver last year, but I don't know what that means for the Badgers, I guess is my point. Looks like a guy who was kind of a little bit on the outs and then went to, greener pastures. Like, what do I expect from a player like that? Because I don't know. I really don't know. And you compound that with our old friend Matthew sent us an email. I'm not going to read the whole thing on the show, but I thought was touched on something maybe we haven't articulated particularly well, is that maybe a lot of all of our uncertainty about this team is because what sort of made it not good last year was a lot of intangible stuff. As soon as it got down, it folded. Like, really, post Ohio State, I think we should stipulate. Like, once that Ohio State game came and went, it was like, this team just keeps folding. Like, it doesn't really seem to punch back at all. And it's really tough when that's sort of like overlaid over any tangible thing like linebacker talent or defensive line talent or whatever you want to talk about. They can snap the ball well because maybe those things don't matter. And Matt laid it bare for me because there's such a wide range of what the team could be. Because it could be 9-3, or it could be 7-5, or it could be 9-3 or fighting for a bowl, and it's such a wide range that I feel like both of them are plausible explanations.
Sure.
Yeah.
Sure.
And I don't know where to make the team better, but it does lead us to a question, which our old friend Prop Bet Andy sent in because he loves hypotheticals. Offseason is for hypotheticals. Let's use this one.
Yes.
He says, you can add one player to the team. It is 2022 Keanu Benton or 2023 Tanner Mordecai. Who are you taking and why?
I would be interested to see how this comes down for other people and what the rationale would be. But I mean, for me, I go by Max's number one law of football, and it's Benton for sure. He's a game wrecker. Whereas, I like Tanner Mordecai was good, and he'd be nice to have another year of him, but or another 2023 where he's healthy the whole year. That's great, but I mean, I'm okay with Tyler Van Dyke and Brandon Locke. I'm okay with that combo.
All right, so it's interesting. I feel like this was a closer comp a few weeks ago. Excuse me.
Yeah,
for me it was, but then it got wider because sort of the logic that they're really fighting. I shouldn't say they are. I got to change to past tense. They were fighting tooth or nail for any defensive line body they could find. Clearly feeling like they needed help there, thinking it's the thing on the team that needs the most help for like depth, whatever.
Sure.
So I was like, oh, of course it's Keanu, right? I mean, honestly, like one of the best defensive linemen that's played at Wisconsin. I mean, just a great, super fun player to watch. And really good, and just a wrecking ball in the middle of that line. And I was like, oh yeah, and that'll make the defense really, really good. But then I started to think back again, because I'm still sticking to that, like the defense will be okay, not great. Like that's sort of my sense. It's like the 20 to 22 points per game, like we talked about last week. And with the offense, let's say the snaps are worked out, right? And you keep the guy healthy. I know that LSU defense was a mess, but man, that guy could sling. And my question is, how many more points per game do you get out of Tanner Mordecai versus Van Dyke / Locke compared to how many fewer points do you give up with Keanu? I think a healthy Tanner Mordecai last year with reasonable snaps, is that team scoring 10 more points a game last year? Like if that offense is in sync, I'm not even talking improving anything around it. Just like the snap is in his hand on time.
Yeah.
Is it 5 points better?
I wonder what the variance is. It would absolutely be better, no question. It would be significant. Let's say 5 to 10.
Like it's interesting to me. Like,
do you think it's 5 or do you think it would be less? I mean, I don't know.
Maybe it's a touchdown.
Yeah. Well, and I was kind of thinking of it this way too. Like if they score right before halftime against Ohio State, like take that one play. And I know on that series there was a bunch of messed up snaps. In fact, I think the one where the on the Will Pauling throw, that was a effed up snap, if I'm not mistaken.
Yep.
Wasn't it? Yeah. So think of it that way. Because I think of the other thing with Benton is I think you'd have multiple situations where you stop somebody on third down and they had to try for a field goal instead of the drive continuing or something like that. I think those situations would be more numerous.
Do you think?
Just because I think he's a game wrecker. Yeah.
Like for me, it's Keanu is clearly the better player of the two, right? And clearly at a position of greater need, but Mordecai may be the player at the position of greater impact, but it's close.
Yeah, right.
I don't know.
Yeah.
I really thought like, oh, it's Keanu. And
I still do.
Before I was, here's the funny thing. Before I was like, ooh, this is really, really close. And then like, because Andy sent this to us a while ago, a couple weeks ago. And then like last week, I'm like, oh, maybe we don't want to use this because it's clearly Keanu. But then for me, I started to think about it again, and maybe I've just overthought it, and I've swung back a little closer. Like I'm almost playing devil's advocate here just for the sake of content, but I'm not. Like I think I'm talking myself into Mordecai. Like I kind of think a competent high-level quarterback who doesn't turn the ball over would be a real asset to have for this defense. because the guy who's replacing him, the likely replacement, has a greater propensity to turn the ball over than he did. So I'm like,
True
man.
enough. True enough. I'm starting to feel too like I'm like way higher on Van Dyke than a lot of people are, and
I think you're higher than
y-
me.
y- yeah, I know I'm higher than you, but I think I'm higher than the majority, and I just think that he's out of one-time ACC Rookies of the Year. He's not Russell Wilson, but he's a lot closer to Russell Wilson than he is to Danny O'Brien.
Oh, I disagree.
Yeah, I know. That's what I say.
Like-
I'm in the minority.
By a lot,
But I'm
actually.
pretty high on him. Yeah.
I think he's way closer to Danny O'Brien, like way closer to Danny O'Brien. If you were to say which player is a better comp, Danny O'Brien is a better comp to me than Russell. Russell Wilson had 3 really good seasons. Danny O'Brien had a really good season and then a bad season, and then came strolling into town.
Be that as it may, I'm drawing a line from Danny O'Brien to Russell Wilson. I'm taking the midpoint, and he's closer to Russell Wilson than he is to Danny O'Brien.
Okay, yeah, no, I'm doing the same. That's what I'm saying. Is I feel like he's.
I know.
Yeah.
I know.
All right.
Yeah.
Wow.
And I don't know
Disagreement.
if that's rational, and I don't know if I'm going to be crash and burn. But I just, I don't. I'm a lot more bullish on him than I think a lot of people are. But you know what, though? That kind of brings us to another part of I forgot. Was it Matthew's email? I think it was, who was talking about what if the offense isn't as or looks like there's no improvement. And I think there are other people that think that there won't be any improvement, or they might be worse.
Yeah, like I guess like I'm sort of maybe trying to thread a needle on all of that. In that I think just numbers wise, Van Dyke will be reasonably productive because the offense will be more functional around him. I just think he has, I don't think you're going to confuse him with something super great and productive.
Sure.
That's all. All right. And then last thing wanted to touch on before we go, and then really take a week off for real this time. Had
real.
2 things about the Varsity Collective this week, which I thought was interesting. Todd Maluski and Jim Polzin, both at the State Journal / Badger Extra, wrote about the collective. Todd Maluski had a really good article that it was like just something for the first time he did. I guess it's FOIA did, or maybe it was just their tax return had to be public, and he got it.
Yeah, that's what it was. Yeah,
but we actually got a look at the Varsity Collective's finances for its first fiscal year.
The Varsity Collective is a nonprofit corporation. It's not owned by the state of Wisconsin, so it's not like there's no FOIA. Like it's not a government entity.
Oh yeah, good point. Yeah.
Yeah. So and if you're a 501c3, then your taxes, or most of them, have to be public anyway, or available.
Yeah, you're right.
Anyway.
You're exactly right. So
had to go lawyer there a little bit.
Yeah. So he had a pretty good article dealing with their first fiscal year of existence. So July 22 to 23. Top line stuff was interesting. They had $3.5 million in contributions, with $1.7 million in athlete spend, and basically $700,000 in advertising. So $1 million and change in surplus there. What's interesting is this existed like as was stated in the article. The information in this thing was almost kind of like ancient history, in that it was before it was ruled that collectives and coaches could coordinate and they could use payments as inducements like they can now. And the data is like already old news, so to speak. But
well, the timing of it too is that their fiscal year runs from June to June, and they don't have to file until the following year. So you won't have the data for the next year until 2025.
Oh yeah, but what he meant was more like the behavior of the collective was different than it is.
Yeah. Right.
Of the $3.5 million in contribution, $2.5 million came from 10 people.
Right,
so these things are just it's like a new booster arm. That's all it really is.
It is
on some level.
I started to read the article, and then I got sidetracked to something else, and I wasn't able to get back to it. How do you think that top 10 is whatever 2.5 is to 3? What is that? 85%, or
it's like 3. It's like 2/3.
82%, something like that. Okay. How does that compare to other ones? Gotta be about
So-
the same, right?
I imagine that you have a group of bigger donors who donate the vast majority
Yeah.
of the money. The only thing they had
Right.
that were comps were they had just revenue numbers from 2 universities that also filed. One was Indiana, who had slightly larger contributions at 3.8 million, but significantly smaller payments at 672,000, which is funny. Like they have a lot of money they're sitting on, which may be why the Badgers are losing out to guys at Indiana. You don't know. Like a coaching change brings about a flood of spend. You always wonder.
It could be, but like Wisconsin football to Indiana football, Wisconsin basketball to Indiana basketball. I mean, I don't know.
Yeah, it could be. And well,
Yeah,
to your point though, so they also have numbers from Marquette, who obviously doesn't have a football team. They made just under their collective took in just under $1 million and spent 300,000. So you're looking at a different scale when you get out of the Power 4 football level.
sure. The ratio of income to athlete spend seems pretty comparable, though, doesn't it?
Well, it's in terms of a percentage, yeah, I think a lot of it. See, this is what is really hard. Is this thing is so opaque. Like we don't really know anything, and there isn't a lot. Like they have. It's funny because it's basically on one level to me, NIL is just moving the booster money around the poker table, so to speak. Like it's just a different way for booster spend to happen. But the difference now is it's much more visible than it was in the past. Like, when a big booster would give money, they would, the only way you'd really know anything is if you went into the quarterback's meeting room and you'd see the person's name, right?
Sure.
And it's not like they were particularly, you didn't really see a direct, tangible through line from their money to, oh man, they lost out on that defensive lineman to Indiana or LSU. Like it's different now in that you feel like you see it, so people get more stressed about it. And yeah, how does it make me feel? Like there's the few things that we do see, like they're pushing this beer thing quite a bit. But the beer thing, the reality is the beer thing is going to be a few $100,000 according to this. Like that's their goal.
Yeah.
Like maybe
I saw
3,
that.
4.
It was like 250 to 3.
Yeah. So, okay. Like, I mean, it's something. It's not something to sneeze at. That would be 10% of revenue for that year. But I think in the end, it's just going to be a thing you're going to be frustrated about because it's also, I mean, I'll just be straight up honest. It's boring. It's not why I follow college football, to understand the economics of the collectives and how it all functions. Because also that's not even the non-tax deductible one. The one that's actually doing the direct deals. Like that's a different entity altogether. That's that VC Connect or whatever it is. It's all, again, the opacity on this thing is so bizarre, but they're the ones that can actually make the payments.
I forgot about that.
Yeah. What this is all sports, and it's payments to make appearances at nonprofits. That's how it becomes a nonprofit. You show up at the Boys and Girls Club and promote the Boys and Girls Club, and that is how they justify the whole thing. But
well, and I was trying to think of Indiana if there was something comparable, but I would have to think that like for Wisconsin women's volleyball, they would spend more there, wouldn't they? Because there's like, it's high profile. I don't know.
You have a lot of questions, and also you're dealing with a different time frame. I don't get caught up on it at all. Like I think it was just they were looking for some other benchmark number, and it's the only one they could get. So I don't get too hung up on it. But
I don't think you can. Well, and like you said, it's opaque. It ain't transparent. The only thing I would say though is that if anybody knows, I haven't been to my local Woodman's, which I do have one 10 minutes away from my house in North Aurora, Illinois. The Woodman's, not my house, but I would hope that the Varsity Collective beer is available to me just because I have a Woodman's close by. If anybody knows that, that's what I was hoping. But I don't know that because I know there's plenty of Badgers in the western suburbs that would be happy to buy Varsity Collective beer.
Yeah. Also, I wouldn't lose a ton of sleep if you can't. If you're really
what if it's good?
Well, that's fine. but that's not the idea behind motivating people to buy it. It's a golden ale. I'm not a golden ales. It's not my. I'm not an ale guy. Give me a pale. Give me a pilsner. Give me a lager. I'm not just an ale. Helles.
Are you
lager.
surprised? Are you surprised? Are you surprised that it was a golden ale as opposed to a pilsner? I would have expected a Wisconsin beer to have been a lager or pilsner.
I guess
A beer with that's branded with the state of Wisconsin.
I
I was
guess.
a little surprised to see it in a golden ale format or style.
I think maybe that's more because not that they're doing this football out, but the reality is they're doing it football out. Can't believe I'm talking about this beer, but I guess a golden ale is a little more like tailgatey fall type of beer. I guess. I don't know. Max, we're talking about it. We shouldn't have come back this week. This is a terrible idea.
Maybe an Oktoberfest?
Yeah, I mean, but you can't have that year round. So, all right.
Well, maybe they'll have it special.
Max, I'm done with you. I'm not talking anymore.
Look, I'm excited about the beer. Okay.
Can you see the look on my face? I'm annoyed.
No, I've turned away, so I don't have to talk to the wall or sound. So no,
you won't make eye contact with me.
Maybe.
All right. On that note,
maybe that's why this has gone on so long. All right.
Yes, let's end this thing. This is terrible. We will.
If anybody knows about the beer, let me know.
Yeah, let Max know. He can look at it. It's on the Petoskey's or whatever it's called, that brewery's website. You can.
Ooh, I'm going to go there right after we get off of this call.
You can find out there. All right. So on that note, Max, let's wrap 314. We will be gone next week. As this time we're keeping our promise. We'll see you guys in a few as we get into the summer schedule. Can't believe we're saying it.
Absolutely.
Bye-bye.
Happy Memorial Day. Until the next time.
Enjoy the conversation? Head on over to buckaroundpodcast.com to find all the ways to connect with the show, links to our Patreon page, and feeds for every major podcasting platform. We want to thank each and every one of our patrons. You make this podcast possible. This has been The Buck Around, Badger football analysis from a fan perspective.